Hello everybody, this is MP Damien Couric here for my Facebook Live Town Hall. Now I just want to wait for a couple of minutes so that a few people can get logged on. I'm here just outside the House of Commons and looking forward to the Town Hall with you all this evening. Now I'm just going to, normally I would do it in my office, but I'm in the foyer of the House of Commons here, and so a little bit different. I have my iPad, so I'm just going to make sure that I can see your comments. So a couple people are logging on. Hello. Really appreciate everybody joining me. So just in a few seconds, I will start the plan here this evening is I'll give you a quick update and then make sure to leave as much time as possible for your questions. Just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So if some folks can comment saying that the sound is good on your end. I've got a staff member here that's working on all the technical stuff, but just to make sure that it's working on your end, if you can give me the thumbs up, that would be appreciated. And then I literally have my iPad with the Facebook because the plan was to be in my office, but like many things, there's a couple thumbs up. Awesome, thank you so much. Like many things in politics, things change rapidly. So I'm in the foyer of the House of Commons here. There's a debate currently taking place in Parliament, and I'm on House duty today. So usually debates wrap up at around 6 o'clock, but not tonight. We're going right till 10:30. But wanted to make sure that I could do this town hall and connect with constituents. So there's a good number of people on, so that's great. Appreciate you all joining this town hall. Like I said, start with a quick update and then get to as many questions as possible. So first, thank you for joining. It is absolutely foundational both to our democratic process, but to me being your member of parliament, that we stay connected, even though it's a challenging time to do that with COVID and everything that's happening in our world. It's a challenge to stay connected, but this is one of those opportunities to be able to do that. And I know I do Facebook updates every now and again, but wanted to do a more scheduled town hall so that I can answer hopefully your questions so feel free to start commenting if you have some of those questions. So I wrote down just a couple of quick things to share, a few things of what I'm up to, back and forth between the constituency pretty much every week. It's an honor to be your member of parliament, and I'm doing everything I can to represent you, stand up for you in our nation's capital. And it's been spending lots of time in an airplane, but that's okay, because I'm wanting to make sure that your voices are heard. Now, because of COVID, obviously the constituency side of work has changed. I'm still connecting with tons of constituents over the phone, via Zoom. I've done more Zoom calls in my life in the last year than I thought I'd probably ever do, but it's important to be able to stay connected. So with the new restrictions in Alberta coming forward, I do want to just acknowledge, I know a couple of weeks ago, I had a couple of meetings planned, and came down. My stomach wasn't feeling well, and out of an abundance of precaution, ended up canceling those in-person meetings. We take all the precautions that we can, but because waiting for that COVID test and whatnot, which came back negative. Just there's some dynamics that exist. So if you do want a meeting, happy to make sure that we schedule that via Zoom. So thanks. Thank you for that. Then a couple of things that I did want to make sure that I shared with you, projects that I've been working on. One, an email newsletter. Trying to, like I said, connect with constituents in every way possible. One of the ways that I am attempting to do that is with an email newsletter. So that is something that I just started last month. I believe tomorrow morning is of the second month, and just with some basic information, some information about government programs, some community events, and some of the things that I've been up to. If you would like to sign up, please feel free to do that. I will post a link in the comments as well. so that you can sign up and get those monthly updates. And just to let you know, it's not for political fundraising or anything like that. This is just constituent information. There will be a regular monthly email, and then if there's something really important, make sure that I can reach out to you. So I'll post that link in the comments. There's a ton of big issues. I wrote down a number of things that are important to talk to, but you know what? I've spent enough time of me talking. So why don't I leave it over to you. Conservatives are hard at work in the capital and doing everything we can to both hold the government to account, be productive, and ensure that your concerns are heard. So it's an honor to be able to do that. And when it comes to the specifics, like I said, I wrote down a few things, but I'll just start taking your questions. So I'm gonna scroll up to the top here. I appreciate all of the hellos and the confirmation that the sound is coming through. If there are technical difficulties, I do apologize, but make sure to comment right away so that we can try and resolve them. We've had it so the internet has crashed before on us, and certainly we'll try to get those resolved. But sometimes we can't see that as quickly, so make sure you comment and let me know. Okay. Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming. So got a question about the Conservative Party leadership race and specifically a question about Pierre Poilievre. And I'll tell you, Pierre is a valued part of our team. And I actually asked that question as well because Pierre had talked to me, told me he was considering a run, and he shared with me that the stage of life he was in, and a young daughter, and a very, very demanding job running for both the campaign and the potential of running for leader and really being leader of a national political party. It's a 10-year commitment, and it's go. And Pierre explained the process that he went through to decide with his family what was best for the stage of life that they're in. But look, Pierre is still a valued part of the team. I wouldn't pick anybody else to be our shadow minister of finance. He tears apart the Liberals each and every day, whether it's in the House of Commons or the other work that he is doing, and incredibly effective at that. He is a part of the core team that Aaron O'Toole has brought around him to make sure that we can do everything we can to hold the Liberals to account. And so as for Pierre, and he's still a part of that team, and he's a pretty young guy. So that's there's I have no doubt a bright future for him there. So the extended CEBA, great question. And Conservatives from the beginning have been fighting to ensure that small businesses have the support required to get through this pandemic. So there's been some changes to the CEBA program. At first, it started very, very limited reach, and it's expanded throughout the course of the last 8 or so months, and it has continued to do so. Now, the most recent changes both extended and expanded the program a little bit, most notably, and this was especially significant for a lot of small business owners, sole proprietors. It was expanded to include personal bank accounts, not just business accounts, among a number of other changes. So I know, Richard, I believe we've been in touch a number of times about this, and hopefully those expansions have assisted you. If not, please do reach out again, and we will continue to connect with you on that. Jake, great question about the real reason the Liberals are deflecting on the fiscal update. I'll tell you, it's not just the fiscal update. In fact, our country is on the second half of this fiscal year, and we have not had a budget. So the budget year, which the federal government's fiscal year goes from April 1st to March 31st. And we have not had a budget. And I'll tell you, that's very concerning, especially when other comparable jurisdictions around the world, most provinces, have put in budgets or at least fiscal updates. Now, the finance minister did announce the other day that there will be one on Monday. So I'll have lots, I'm sure, to say about that as soon as we see the details. But in true Liberal fashion, the government has been deflecting and delaying all aspects of their COVID response. I'll tell you, it's frustrating because Canadians deserve to know how much money is being spent so that the government can be held accountable. So Conservatives have been piecing together as much information as we can to ensure that we're able to do our job to hold the government to account for the nation's finances and ensure that there's a plan going forward, both in terms of long-term spending, where the money's coming from. The Bank of Canada is using different fiscal mechanisms than would normally be used. We're looking at a federal budget of $500 billion. Now, to give some context, in 2015, when Stephen Harper left office, the budget was just a little north of $250 billion. This year's, and we don't even know for sure, but it appears that this year's federal budget will be more than $500 billion. That's probably double, if not more. Very, very concerning. And then what's even more concerning is the state of the nation's debt, which will surpass $1 trillion, and that's the net debt. So you can probably hear some applause from the House of Commons. It's just on the other side here. So $1 trillion net debt. So that's, you take all the government's assets, and it's the debt owing, and very, very concerning thing. So there's a lot more that I'll have to say on that as soon as we do get this fiscal update. But in true Trudeau fashion, back in, I believe it was the beginning of June, he provided a fiscal snapshot, a fiscal selfie, I called it, because it was just little details with very, very little information, and then he called that good. That is truly disrespectful to Canadians, to taxpayers, and because it's not the government's money. That's one of my biggest frustrations with the way that the government treats the nation's finances. They think it's their money. Well, let me tell you something. It's not the government's money. It's not Parliament's money. It's not an MP's money. It is Canadians' money, and it needs to be treated with the utmost respect. Okay, I could go on more on that, but I want to get to as many of these questions as I possibly can. So. Okay. So thanks, Michelle. How can the Liberals allow that people can it's a question about the CERB and CERB eligibility. Now, the CERB, facing an unprecedented pandemic, something had to be done. A lot of Canadians were facing incredible challenges. So Conservatives worked with the government to push for a program that would allow things to get done. Now, Conservatives would have done things very differently. I can assure you of that. And it's interesting because the program actually evolved a lot from when it was first proposed, and then with effective, sustained pressure by Conservatives, the program did evolve and made what was an inadequate program, made it somewhat better. Now, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and you bring up a good one about accountability in terms of who received that. According to some recent reports, it appears that there could be upwards of $17 billion that was awarded fraudulently or incorrectly. In fact, there's a story from a neighboring constituency to mine where the MP encouraged their staff to go through the application process to not ask for the money, but just to go through it so that they could help people on the phone. And then it turns out they got the deposit. And then it was difficult to send the money back. Now, they did send the money back, of course, because that's the right thing to do. But they didn't even press submit at the end, but still got the money. And I know there's other people that have received it twice, other people that weren't sure about the eligibility because of some of the rules that were confusing. And then there are people that have got it fraudulently. And that includes, there's examples where there are inmates in federal prisons that have got that. There's non-residents that have received it. There's a whole bunch of questions that need to be asked, and these are concerns that Conservatives brought up back months and months ago. But we were called irresponsible for asking those questions at the time. Well, good accountability is not irresponsible. In fact, it's the opposite. And we're going to continue to fight for answers on all aspects of that. And then regarding healthcare from from the United States. In fact, Michelle, if you can send me details on that, because I'm not aware of that specific case, I'd be very, very curious to see that. Okay, a question about COVID vaccines and are they going to be mandatory? And look, I am a firm believer that vaccines should not be mandatory. Now, I do believe that vaccines are often a great idea. They are when they're proven to be safe, when they're proven to be effective, they are a great idea. And for example, I often get the flu vaccine, but at the same time, Canadians deserve respect, and Canadians can be responsible and make decisions for their own health and well-being. And so I'm opposed to mandatory vaccinations. Now, the government's been pretty coy on this, so we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but I'll tell you, it would be incredibly difficult. In fact, I think constitutionally there'd probably be some challenges for them to try and make vaccines mandatory. And there will be lots further questions on that as we go along. But look, with COVID-19, there are vaccines that are under development, and it is absolutely fundamental for the safety and confidence of Canadians that it is clear that these are safe, that they are in the best interests of Canadians, and that Canadians can know where they're coming from, what the background and the development is, and that they're accessible as well. That's the whole other side of the equation. When a vaccine is made available, it appears that Canada is at the back of the line compared to many of our global counterparts. In fact, we heard today that there's 2 billion people ahead of Canada in terms of being in line for vaccines. And the problem is that calls into question a whole bunch surrounding it, because if you can't access it, then government is forced to make decisions about where it's sourced and whatnot. Very, very concerning things, but both the Conservative team is hard at work making sure that we are getting as many answers on this as we can. So thanks for that question. And there's a comment about, I love his videos. I suspect that's talking about Pierre Poilievre, and I'll tell you, there is nobody better in question period than Pierre Poilievre and a whole bunch of our Conservative team. They are just fantastic at asking the right questions, and I know a lot of people will say that it's frustrating that we often don't get good answers, and I agree with you. But Conservatives are hard at work, and I'll tell you, a lot of the news stories and whatnot that you hear from about whether it be Liberal scandals or other information from the government, a lot of the genesis of those stories come from question period. So although the Liberals may not give a good answer in the beginning, that doesn't mean that Conservatives don't continue digging. That's just that's 1 hour of the day. Conservatives are hard at work throughout the rest of the day, fighting for you and for answers. So question about the Premier and demanding that Trudeau opens his books on the Ethics Committee and the WE scandal. And look, Jeff, I appreciate the question, and I was on the Ethics Committee this summer, and I'll tell you, we worked hard to get answers, and there's more that is being done on that as we speak. The Finance Committee is still working on that. The Ethics Committee is still working on it. There are, I believe, 3 or 4 concurrent investigations into the Liberals' conduct, and although criminal investigations are not public, and rightfully so. It's not a politician's job to interfere in criminal investigations. That's what the Liberals do. That's what they did with SNC Lavalin and why Jody Wilson-Raybould was kicked out and a whole bunch of that stuff. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of evidence and more that's being uncovered that shows incredibly disturbing actions on the behalf of Justin Trudeau and senior players and I'm pointing because the Liberals sit on that side of the house. So like I said, I'm on for those of you that just joined, thank you very much for joining. I am broadcasting live from the foyer of the House of Commons. Right next door is what's called the Conservative Lobby, or the Opposition Lobby, where opposition parties have kind of a meeting room behind the House of Commons, and then just probably 30 or 40 feet away is the House of Commons, the opposition side, and then the other side. So when I point that direction, I'm pointing at where the Liberals sit, and there's a lot of symbolism and whatnot in the way that you do things. But when it comes to, and Jeff, I see I see your follow-up, and I'm not finished answering the question. So, but was planning on doing this in my office, and but because there's a debate that's going late into the night, had to make some last-minute changes. So back to Liberal investigations. So there's a whole bunch of these things that are ongoing. It's difficult to keep these things in the news, but there's more and more that's being revealed all the time, and that includes just as we speak. There's an evaluation on some of the documents that were provided, why certain things were redacted, what documents were included and not included, and there's a whole bunch of other aspects of that, and that's why Parliament exists. It is to hold the government to account. Now, it's been shameful the way that they have tried to abuse that, whether it be the prorogation of Parliament, unprecedented the way that it was done, but there's tools that we are using each and every day to ensure that we get to the bottom of this. And I'll tell you, there are times where you feel like you're kind of hitting your head against the wall, but then there's other days where you feel like you're starting to move forward. I'll give you an example. It's not directly related to but about just bringing good governance back to this country. Conservatives brought forward a motion to deal with Huawei and their involvement in Canada's 5G network, and then some of the very troubling foreign influence that exists in our country, and specifically, I believe it's called Operation Fox Hunt, where the Chinese foreign state actors are actually harassing Canadians in Canada. That is not acceptable, and the government's response has been absolutely abysmal. And so Conservatives brought forward a motion demanding some action. That motion passed with support from other opposition parties. But here's what's encouraging. There were, I believe it was 4 or 5 Liberals that voted in favor of the Conservative amendment. Now, I'm sure that the Prime Minister and his government weren't very happy about it, but there were a few Liberals that stood up to that continues to be just an unbelievable level of corruption that's being demonstrated from this government. And when it comes to specifically the Premier demanding, I know that the Premier Kenney in Alberta has been very busy, especially as of late. So I will leave that to him to answer that. In fact, my assistant who's helping me here today made the comment that Jason Kenney is actually doing a Facebook Live just prior to this. So not saying that you should leave this Facebook town hall, but make sure to, if that's something that is being asked on that town hall. Okay, the Great Reset. I'll tell you, in typical Liberal fashion, Justin Trudeau starts parroting the ideas of the Davos elites in the middle of a pandemic at a speech virtually at the UN. Typical Trudeau. In fact, there's very few things that would surprise me that the Liberals would do, and I'm not surprised one bit about that. The context for this, for those of you who might not be aware, is a couple of weeks ago, Justin Trudeau made a speech and basically said, look, this is an opportunity, I'm paraphrasing, but an opportunity for a great reset, to rebuild our economy to a green carbon future, to be just and all of these other buzzwords. But the problem is that much of what he's suggesting is a massive social experiment that does not benefit the best interests of Canadians. So while the Liberals want to parrot ideologies that are forwarded from things like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, Conservatives are focused on Canadians, making sure that Canadians' interests are served, making sure that we are prepared to build our economy back, not build back better. We need to just rebuild our economy, make sure that Canadians are able to prosper again, and that Canadians can get to work. I'll tell you, it is incredibly concerning, and we saw it in the beginning with the Liberals' gun grab. They used a tragedy which was completely irrelevant to what they actually did when we've learned since that most of the firearms, in fact, the article that I read mentioned all the firearms that were used in that terrible shooting, they were illegally sourced. But Justin Trudeau uses that as an excuse to forward his political agenda. That is shameful, and Liberals should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. And I'll tell you, there is a growing distrust of the government in that, because he's willing to ignore the best interests of Canadians to pursue his own personal political ends. That is the opposite of leadership, and that's what Conservatives are calling out each and every day. So hopefully that answers your question on the Great Reset. We're holding the government to account on parroting those sorts of ideas that But again, not surprising, coming from Liberals, that would mean that they want to shut down, phase out, in Justin Trudeau's words, the energy sector, that they want to change the economy for their specific interests, make government more authoritarian. And I say that because Justin Trudeau said he admires China, the same China that is intimidating Canadian citizens, that has imprisoned Canadians in China. So anyways, I could talk a lot more on that, but hopefully that answers your question. So there's a question about COVID testing and what COVID is. And say, look, there's a ton of information out there and misinformation about COVID. I will tell you, it is serious. Now that's probably a controversial opinion to many, but it is serious. And there is reasons why there's been actions taken, why there's testing and all of these other things. It is more than just the flu. Now, most people who get COVID do recover, and I'm very, very thankful for that. In fact, when I would talk to and I don't just hear the information from the government's doctors, I read a ton on this. So for anybody who is thinking or typing comments saying that I don't know what I'm talking about, I have taken it upon myself to make sure that I am reading all sides of this conversation. But I'll tell you, it is serious. Now, back in March and April, when we had no idea what we were dealing with, it was a lot scarier. We are getting now to understand more about what is really for the first time, at least on a large scale, that coronavirus has been spread around the world, and it's required a significant medical response. Now, coronavirus itself is not necessarily a new pathogen. It's not necessarily a new virus. For example, cattle and whatnot have been vaccinated for coronavirus for a long time, so it's not new. It's just the strain of it is different and very concerning, because epidemiologists and whatnot didn't know what they were dealing with. They didn't know what the death rate would be. And I talked to some doctors that were terrified of what this would mean. Now, each and every day we're learning more. And it is important that the government doesn't try to hide the facts from Canadians. In fact, it needs to be the opposite. And that's one of the things that we're demanding each and every day. We want the numbers, we want the information, so that we can ensure that the right actions are being taken. And that's what Conservatives are doing, making decisions and asking questions based on the evidence. Now, does that mean that we're always going to get it right? Probably not, but we are doing our best in that regard. Now, there's a lot of concerning actions with the government, and the fact that they refuse to admit that they were wrong. They didn't close our borders early enough. There's contradictory messaging on masks. There's a ton of reasons why we cannot trust the Liberal government. And now specifically, I'll get back to the specifics of this question about COVID testing. COVID testing is an important part of the response, because that basically allows us to understand where the virus is and what it's doing. Now, there's a lot of information about testing as well, and some very valid questions are being asked. And I've been frustrated, quite frankly, about the refusal for there to be balance in the conversation. Now, the government, the Liberals, and a lot of the news media, it's all about fear, and it's all about extreme positions. There has to be balanced, thoughtful debate on this so that we actually make the right decisions, folks. That's what's important. Decisions in the best interests of of Canadians. COVID testing is an important step because it allows us to understand where this virus is, what it's doing, and how that impacts the way that we live our lives. Good testing allows for us to actually understand what's out there, how it's going. I've been tested a whole bunch of times because I travel so much. I've not, as far as I know, had COVID, and it's a tool, one tool. It's not the silver bullet. Just the same thing as this. This doesn't go away with a vaccine, but it's a tool that can be used to help ensure that we are doing the right things, that it's a good response, that it's based on sound science. Okay. Wanted to make sure that I get to as many questions as possible, so I'm going to try and speed it up here. So reports on a nationwide shutdown. Now, most so thank you, Julie, for that question. There is been reports, and in fact, I had a whole bunch of you folks, a whole bunch of constituents reach out with an email. One was from LPC Leaker. Another was a supposed Facebook message. And I'll tell you, very, very concerning when I see those things. But most of that is misinformation. Now, the best misinformation is when there's a little bit of truth in it. The government will not be doing mandatory, military on our streets types of lockdowns, okay? Premiers and provinces are responsible for the health measures. The federal government gives them guidance. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of information surrounding this that's required to make good decisions. And the federal government has a lot to answer for on some of the advice that they have made. But it's, when it comes to a lot of the accusations that the military is going to be brought in, that, and the isolation camps. I'll use the isolation camps as a thing because I know a lot of people reached out to me legitimately concerned. And when I saw some of that information, I too, legitimate concerns about what the government's doing, how they're spending our tax dollars as part of it, and the freedom and security of Canadians. But after I did some digging, and I'm continuing to do the digging, so I'm not just leaving these things. I'm making sure each and every day, it doesn't stop when I get one answer. I keep digging. The isolation camps that were reported, well, they're not these internment camps that some people suggested they were. I'm sorry, but they were not. That was fake news. But the reason why it was believable is because there were circumstances where if somebody was coming back to Canada from another country but wasn't able to quarantine effectively, or safely. For example, they lived with, maybe an immunocompromised family member, or a refugee that escaped a war-torn region, or something like that, where they didn't have a safe place to go. That's what these facilities, most of which were in hotels. Now, I've asked a lot of questions on this. I'll be getting some answers to make sure that everything is above board here, and to make sure that it's not Liberal donors that are getting these contracts that are being awarded. But it's not what there's some misinformation, and we need to call it what it is. And I'm sure that there will be people that are mad at me for saying that. But look, the only people I work for are the constituents of Battle River Crowfoot. I don't work for the Liberals. I don't work for the government. In fact, constitutionally, government is a function of Parliament. Government can only operate because of Parliament, and Parliament is the voice of the people. Now, so some people will, be, I'm sure, accusing me of various things. But I'll tell you, in all seriousness, I am doing everything I can to fight for the interests of the people of Battle River Crowfoot, find the right information to make the right decisions. I'm not bought off by the pharmaceuticals, the vaccine companies. Corporations can't donate to political parties in Canada, which is a good thing. That means that there's less corruption. So look, folks, it's important that we have balance in the conversation. And it's unfortunate that there's been so much division because it doesn't lead to better decisions. Okay? So that's, yeah. So a question about holding the government to account, and really appreciate that, Ashley. And I'm sure there's lots of comments here. So I'm how long have we been going? Sorry? 35 minutes. 35 minutes. Perfect. We still got lots of time. I don't have a timer on my it's just on my phone here. So I apologize if the battery dies. I think it's good for quite a while longer. But so questionable government accountability. Look, things take time. Conservatives are hard at work. We're seeing the news. When it comes down to it, though, the most effective tool to ensure that accountability is had is via an election. Now, in the meantime, we're going to use every tool at our disposal. And I see Justin Trudeau, and again, I'm pointing because that's where the Liberals sit over there. I see him every day, and there's concern. There's concern within the Liberal caucus. There's concern within his cabinet that there is that the truth is coming out. That's why they're working so hard to cover things up. Conservatives won't give up. Now, it does take time, and I agree, Ashley. I would love for it to be faster, but the tools of Parliament work. It just takes a little bit of time, and Conservatives are using every tool at our disposal to demand that accountability. Okay, so is PC with you? And I'm not sure about that, but look, let me make a comment about the United Nations. Very concerning, some of the things that they're doing. I believe it was just the global status of women committee or something like that appointed like a foreign dictator to be the chair. Some very, very concerning stuff. The difference between Liberals and Conservatives is this. The Liberals and Conservatives simply parrot the activist notions of the United Nations, whereas Conservatives stand up for Canada and ensure that international institutions like the United Nations serve Canadians' best interests, because that's what leadership is about. So hopefully that adds a little bit of clarity. So another question about the lockdown. I did answer that earlier, Heather. In terms of a national lockdown, health measures are the responsibility of the provincial government. But I'll tell you, Conservatives are watching each and every day what's happening with the Liberals, watching carefully and ensuring that any decisions that are made on a federal level that the government is held to account on. And we're going to continue to do that. Okay. Sorry, just going to go through a few comments, a couple of follow-ups here. So a comment on Bill C-216 specifically. Thanks, Jake. It's specifically about supply management, and there is some concerns about this, and it's being brought forward by the separatist Bloc Québécois party that truly don't have Canada's best interests in mind. And I haven't read the whole bill yet. We haven't voted on it yet. But I am concerned that the sort of language in the bill would not be good for Canada's best interests, both in terms of future trade negotiations, but also ensuring that there's accountability in the agricultural, in all aspects of how our economy operates across the country and all segments of the economy. So that probably doesn't clearly answer your question, but I know we Conservatives have been discussing it. And I have no doubt we'll have more to say. Okay, so just so thanks, Jake, for asking for my preliminary view, because it was a preliminary view on that. Okay, so just a question. So an individual asking about an immigration concern. Thank you very much for that. The best thing to do when it comes to immigration concerns is send me an email, or give me a call, because my office can work with you to try and get answers, can assist you in that process. And although there's sometimes fees and whatnot for applications, my office does not charge for the services it provides to constituents. Okay, so my recommendation, I can't speak to the specifics of your circumstance, but please feel free. And this goes for everybody. If you have a concern with a federal government program or service, it's either not working the way that it should, you're not sure where to turn, or if you're just watching this and you don't know what number to call, okay, feel free to call my office. I'm a I'm a kid that grew up on a farm in Battle River Crowfoot who's working hard on your behalf. And my office is from, my staff. One is a farmer, the other grew up in the constituency. They're from the area, they understand the concerns, and they work hard on your behalf. So when it comes to specifics, whether it be immigration, CRA, whatever the case is, feel free to reach out with specifics. We call that casework, that's kind of the technical word, but feel free to reach out and we can assist you in that process. I've got great staff. And a big shout out to my staff while I'm on the line here. I have an amazing team that is working diligently to make sure that you are well served, both in our capital and in the constituency, because a big part of a member of parliament's job is to make sure government serves the people of that constituency. So that's, and my staff do an incredible job at that. Okay, so I answered about the lockdown. So question about borrowing. Very good questioning. So there's a lot of what the technical word would be fiscal mechanisms that the government can use in terms of borrowing, but one of the biggest concerns right now is the fact that the Bank of Canada is basically printing money. It's buying its own bonds, and that devalues the economy, both in the short term, because it's basically injecting a whole bunch of money into the economy. But then in the long term, there is consequences to those sorts of things. That's why we need a budget, so that we know exactly what's going on. That's why we need accountability, so that we know exactly what is taking place and that the government can be held to account. That's why it's one thing to delay a budget a little while, even a few months. But the fact that Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament in August to cover up his scandals, and then came back with a throne speech that really wasn't anything new, and then simply started doing a whole bunch of things that weren't even necessarily COVID related, and he still hasn't brought a budget, that's a concern. And that's why Conservatives are so hard at work on the accountability front. So I already talked about the World Economic Forum's, the Great Reset, and I should mention as well, Erin O'Toole, if you go back to my Facebook page from a few days ago, Erin O'Toole actually directly addressed. So I know I had a few people that have been messaging and whatnot saying, when is Erin O'Toole going to address this great recalibration and reset and whatnot? Erin already addressed that here a number of days ago, and you can find that. Okay. So yeah, and it's that build back better. Build back better is sure a nice catchphrase, but what does it mean? Well, unfortunately, in the eyes of the Liberals and the NDP and other leftists in this country, it means eliminating the energy industry. It means, quite frankly, eliminating. And I spent some time working for Brad Wall's government in Saskatchewan a number of years ago. I'll tell you, Brad did I think a tremendous job as the premier of that province, and it was an honor to be able to assist him and some of the people that were elected there. And I found it really interesting because Brad said, look, the left has been attacking the energy industry, and they've been successful in doing so, attacking Canadian energy, not American, not Saudi Arabian, not North Sea, Canadian energy. And that is a national shame that that's been the case. We have the best energy in the world, most sustainably, ethically sourced energy in the world, whether it be the oil sands, whether it be natural gas, and the huge potential that's out there for LNG, whether it be conventional oil, whatever the case is, tremendous energy in this country. Yet, when it comes to some of these Build Back Better, Green New Deal type statements, the left wants to destroy the Canadian energy industry. And the reason why I mentioned Brad Wall is because he said agriculture is next, conventional agriculture. Look, I come from a farming family. I'm sure a whole bunch of the people watching this come from farming backgrounds. And it is unbelievable that the government would parrot the ideas of Build Back Better when it's so loaded with ideology that's risky, that it's not in the best interests of Canadians, and quite frankly could devastate the livelihood of many Canadians. Already their policies are having a tremendous negative impact. Okay. So question about the CERB. Great question. Thanks, Larry. And why was the tax not taken off? Great question. We've been asking that since the beginning. So for anybody who has received the CERB, a public service announcement, that will be taxable. Now, that could be depending on your income, could be as high as 25, 30%. So come tax time, that's going to be a real challenge. And that's something that Conservatives said was an issue from the beginning, especially for folks that are used to having deductions taken off of their paycheck at work. And it's nothing against them for not knowing. That's just, especially for young people that are, are getting their first jobs and whatnot, just out of university, whatever the case is, real concerns about that. And there has to be, full accounting and understanding about the negative impacts that will have on a lot of people's livelihoods. So if you're still receiving those benefits, make sure to it's saving about 25% is probably a safe number. And I know a lot of the people that have reached out to my office, I've shared that with them so that when it comes to tax time, it can be taxed appropriately. So there will be lots more to come on this. Conservatives have been asking these questions. We'll continue to do so, and to make sure that Canadians understand what's going on. And I know when I was posting about CERB and whatnot, that was one of the things that I tried to communicate with people. Unfortunately, the government did not make it clear in the application process, and that's a problem. And has posed some pretty significant challenges. So question about mandatory vaccines, and I do not support mandatory vaccines, but I do think that there are some very good things associated with vaccines. Look, we don't have to deal with smallpox in this world anymore. The measles is another example. Polio. I still talk to some people that I was talking to shortly after I got elected. Met somebody who explained the fear associated with when polio would break out in a community. So but the government, and this is part of the problem, when you can't trust the government on things like their books, their ethics, it's hard to trust them on anything. And that's why Conservatives are so hard at keeping the government accountable, holding them to account, asking the tough questions, because when they can't be trusted, that poses an issue on all fronts, including the efficacy and safety regarding things like vaccines. So I am opposed to it. I believe that Canadians need to make decisions for their health on what they feel is best for themselves. But at the same time, I do mention, I know that there will be some people that are mad at me, and that's fine. I understand that. There is some good medical sorry, it's now starting to get late. There is good science surrounding vaccines. Okay. Just going to scroll through here. And exactly, somebody just made the comment about how can we, if we don't trust our government, how are we to trust vaccines? I hear you. And that's exactly why ethical failures matter. And that's why Conservatives are hard at work on that. So question about making a coalition with Maxime Bernier and to take back the country. Look, I was really disappointed when Max decided to go on his own party. A lot of the things that Max has said throughout the years, I actually like. The problem is that he was unwilling to be a team player, and it's unfortunate because the Conservative movement suffered. And, if you look at the last election, there were a number of seats that lost the margin of what the People's Party got. And what I found really interesting in Battle River Crowfoot, a number of times that the People's Party candidate, whether it was during debates or whatever the case, would say, I agree with Damien, but vote for me. Well, I'm sorry. Conservatives need to stay united. It is absolutely important. Now, the Conservative Party, we made it very, very clear that folks that, were frustrated, whether it be with the leader, whatever the case is, that's fine. They're welcome to come back. I haven't heard that from Max. In fact, I'm disappointed that Max is still taking a salary from the donations that were received by the People's Party, and I think that it's unfortunate that he continues to want to divide the right. Now they'll say that a whole bunch of things about the Conservative Party. Well, I'll tell you, a lot of in fact, there's some people that I've heard from that will accuse Conservatives of a whole bunch of things that are just patently false. We're a grassroots party. I'm proud to have a board of directors, a local Conservative electoral district association. That's what it's called. It's elected by members. I was elected or nominated as a candidate by members of the Conservative Party, not by special interests, not blacklisted. It's a grassroots party. So if you want to make a difference, get involved. And if you're curious about that, send me a message and I'll tell you how you can get involved, because I want Canadians, I want constituents to be involved in the Conservative movement, because your voice matters. And and the same thing about Conservative Party conventions. I find it very, very troubling that Maxime Bernier left the Conservative Party the day before the Conservative Party convention. Well, you know what the Conservative Party convention is, folks? That's when members of the party get together and make decisions on policy. 2 days before, that's when he decided to leave the party. Very, very disappointed with that. Now, if Max wants to come back to the party, I'm sure that there'd be lots of conversations to be had, but it's unfortunate that that's been the case. But I'll tell you, Conservatives, we stay united. We won't agree on everything. In fact, I can see by some of the comments, we don't agree on everything. That's okay. We agree on the big picture stuff, standing up for Canada, prosperity, freedom, and ensuring that we can work together, because that's how we are going to win the next election, staying united. There's a question about Edna, a question about vaccines being mandatory and just the concerns, and I'll call it a concern. The concern that certain companies, I think it was Ticketmaster actually said the other day that they'll only sell tickets to people who can prove that they've had a vaccine. That's wrong, and certainly I plan to stand up against that sort of thing. And I know that there are others that will do that in that regard. Okay. So I did see a comment of somebody who asked about Alberta separation. Look, I'm a proud Canadian and I'm a proud Albertan, and folks, those things cannot be mutually exclusive. I'm proud that I'm a fifth generation farmer from East Central Alberta. That part of the family came from the United States back in the early 1900s. I had another part of my family that my great grandfather came from England shortly after World War I. I had another grandfather came from Poland, as there was significant unrest and poverty. Canada is a land of opportunity, and it is worth fighting for. In fact, we just celebrated Remembrance Day, where I had the opportunity to speak to, in fact, if you want to watch it, you can. It's back on November 11th. I had the opportunity to speak with a whole bunch of veterans, both at an event, and then there was kind of a physically distanced meeting room where you had a chance to sit down and actually talk with these folks, people who put their lives on the line for Canada. Now, Justin Trudeau is trying to remake Canada, and I'm fighting against that, because those men and women that marched on the beaches of Normandy, that fought for Canadian values around the world, deserve better than a prime minister who will use crises for his own political advantage. I believe in Canada. I believe it can be saved, and I believe that it's worth fighting for. When it comes to Alberta's place in the Federation, I have significant concerns. In fact, there's been a number of folks that I've talked to that proclaim to be separatists, and I'll ask the question about, what would you do? And they'll list off things, and a lot of the things I agree with. Seeing that there's provincial autonomy exercised, concerns about the persecution of Alberta Energy, fiscal irresponsibility on the part of the federal government. On and on the list goes. A lot of those things are provincial jurisdiction because of something called the Constitution. And Alberta has a tremendous amount of power in the Constitution to exercise its authority. And I'm in regular conversations with my provincial counterparts about a lot of those things. And that's why we have a federation. When Canada was first founded, it was built upon the idea that there'd be a national government at the top that would deal with the big picture stuff. And then there would be regional governments, provincial governments. that would deal with the regional issues, whether that be Quebec, whether that be Ontario, that was Upper and Lower Canada, whether that be Prince Edward Island, a little island that is small compared to the big players, or as the country expanded and went across the country, British Columbia, Manitoba, British Columbia, and then Alberta and Saskatchewan, and now the territories. The strength of Canada is that we can be united under a federal government. Now the problem is that we have a federal government that abuses its authority and refuses to respect different regions of the country. That needs to change, because when it comes to how the Federation was meant to work and how it's being abused for the political self-interest of a prime minister that does not respect Canadians or democracy, that's the problem. And when it comes to, we didn't have a Western separatist movement, at least not a sizable one, because it real concerns folks. I get it. And I hear about it every day. But when it comes to the idea, and I talked a lot about the election and pretty much every day since, the idea of good governance. When you have good governance, a lot of the challenges are solved. When Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, there wasn't these same concerns. Now, it's not to say that there's not stuff that needs to be done. There is, and we can continue to talk about those things. Okay, so I want. We're coming close to the hour here. I might try to go a little bit further than 1 hour, and I appreciate all the folks that have either recently joined. For those that just joined, I'm in the foyer of the House of Commons here. Was supposed to do this back in my office, but done it here in the foyer of the House of Commons because I'm on house duty. That's what they call it, house duty, when you're scheduled to sit in the chamber of the House of Commons. So. And really appreciate all of you joining in. Great to be able to connect with you. A question about, sorry, just scrolling through a few of the, Bill 21. Now, what I'd encourage you to do, that is provincial jurisdiction. So what I would encourage you to do is to contact your local MLA. So I'll post a comment in the links on how you can find your local MLA. That's where we talk about the federal versus the provincial, and it's important that you're able to also speak to your provincial representatives on areas of provincial jurisdiction. So I will post a link with information about how to find out, and the reason I'm not going to post specifics is because I have 5 different MLAs that overlap. The federal constituency is way bigger than the provincial constituency, but I will post a link that allows you to find that, and make sure you talk to your MLAs about this. Like me, they serve their constituents, and it's important that you bring concerns to them. Okay, a comment, Albertans want to get back to work. Absolutely. And that's why we need to have a plan. And the failure of this government has been their dithering, their refusal to act on good data has led to the position that we're in today. We need to be able to deal with COVID so that we can get people back to work, get our economy working, because the livelihood of Canadians is of the utmost importance. It is tragic, the consequences that this virus has had on the well-being of Canadians in every regard, economically, socially, emotionally. And I hear about that each and every day, which is why we need leadership and we need a plan. And Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives have been doing everything we can to make sure that there is pressure being put, to make sure that there's better plans, that we hold the government to account, and that there's a better alternative when that election does actually come. Okay. So a question about why I voted against Bill C6. I appreciate that. Look, the coercive and abusive practices related with conversion therapy are wrong, and I do not support that. However, the bill that the Liberals brought forward was a poorly written bill, quite frankly. And what I find really unfortunate is that we have a situation where the government introduced this bill back in, I believe it was February. Some concerns were brought forward. In fact, all parties, including some Liberal members, brought forward some concerns. And the government brought forward that bill, because of COVID and whatnot, it got delayed. When Parliament is prorogued, everything resets. The legislative agenda resets. The government, instead of addressing the concerns, like ambiguity in the wording, like not including a definition as to what they actually mean, and the possibility that it would criminalize faith leaders, parents, about having conversations about sexuality. The government introduced the exact same bill. They're playing politics on this issue, and there were folks from all parties, including some Liberals, that acknowledged the concerns of this. And I heard feedback from a ton of you on this issue, and am confident that I was representing the interests of certainly not all, and that's one of those controversial issues. I heard feedback after the vote on this issue from all sides. But I'll tell you, it is. I listened carefully to the debate, read the bill carefully, and made a decision that I felt was consistent with what would be best representing my constituents and the values that I hold as your MP. No to globalism. And again, the difference between Liberals and Conservatives is Liberals seem to tie themselves to whatever's trendy on the international stage, whether it be the United Nations, Davos, whatever the case is. Conservatives, when it comes to global affairs, in fact, our Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs did a video that I posted on my Facebook page earlier today. And I will just mention, part of the strength of the Conservatives is our team. We have a great, diverse team from across the country of amazing people. And if you're interested, there's a video Michael Chong put forward about Canadian values being at the front of foreign affairs. But the difference between Liberals and Conservatives is that Liberals parrot the ideologies and the trends of the global elite at the United Nations, at Davos and whatnot, whereas Conservatives fight for Canadian interests and ensure that whether it be the United Nations, whether it be other international institutions, that Canada's involvement in those institutions serves Canada's best interests. And quite frankly, folks, the world needs more Canada. Whether that's Canadian energy, whether that's Canadian ideas, whether that's the peace and freedom that our country has fought for throughout our history. The world needs more of that. So when we do what's best for Canada, I'll tell you that's what's best for the world. Okay, so I've already talked about the Great Reset. I'm just going to go through here. There's getting to be a few repeats here, so I apologize, folks. Okay, so a question about therapeutics, and you're absolutely right. In fact, that's one of the questions that we asked the other day about was access to various aspects of this, and certainly there's a lot more questions that need to be answered, and it's unfortunate that there's controversy around this. Why is there controversy around that? Well, I think that some of it is controversy to try and cover up the inaction of the government on some of these things. Okay, just a question about, we talk about ethics and corruption and nothing happens. Ashley, I can assure you a lot is happening. The reason why we hear about it is because Conservatives are hard at work. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I agree. But Conservatives are hard at work. That's why you learned about the WE scandal. That didn't happen by accident. That's why we've learned about, the manipulation of the judicial appointments process. That's why we're, learning about a lot of the different aspects of what the government has done wrong, is because Conservatives are hard at work. So there's certainly talk, because talking is the way that we get the message out. But there's a lot more that Conservatives are doing in terms of the action front, and we'll certainly continue to fight for that. Okay, now I think so a few comments about Bill C7. Now I think I'm at about an hour. Is that? Am I over an hour? Okay. Well, that's okay. I often have a trouble with being on time, so I'll just go a little bit further here. I'll try to wrap it up. Bill C7, related to medical assistance in dying, very flawed bill. In fact, a bill that almost universally by many faith leaders, by many special interest groups, by many Canadians, and I've heard from thousands, would not be a would not be inaccurate about the challenges associated with the changes to medical assistance in dying, also known as assisted suicide or euthanasia. Very concerning. In fact, just the other day, and I'm going to post a video on my Facebook page from Jody Wilson-Raybould. Now, a lot of you will remember Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was stood up to the Prime Minister in the SNC-Lavalin affair, got kicked out of cabinet and left the caucus, et cetera, et cetera. A lot more on that, but that I could talk about. But she actually asked a question about this in question period the other day. Disappointing response from the minister. The Conservatives are hard at work trying to fix a very bad bill, at least make a bad bill a little bit better. I voted against it, and in second reading, Conservatives have been trying to make it better, and I'm sure that, and that's not over. There will be lots more to say on that in the coming days. Very concerning. It puts folks with disabilities at risk. And a lot of the common sense amendments that we've brought forward, it's like the Liberals are being told by the Prime Minister's office, you just can't support the common sense anymore. And it's unfortunate because that hurts Canadians. Conservatives are going to keep standing up to that sort of thinking. Okay, so hopefully that's clear on C7. Question about the two Michaels, getting them back on Canadian soil. For those of you that don't know, there are two Canadians, both happen to be named Michael, that are currently imprisoned in China and have been, I think, for more than like 500 days. It is unbelievable that the Liberals have refused to take action on that, and that's a big part of the reason why Conservatives have been trying to stand up, have been forcing the government, not just trying, we're forcing the government to take action regarding China because they are putting Canadians at risk. The two Michaels are a great example in China. The persecution of Canadians, in fact, the Chinese ambassador threatened 300,000 Canadians that live in Hong Kong. Threatened them. That's unacceptable. Yet the government really just stated a few non-controversial talking points. Well, the government's supposed to stand up to threats against Canadians, an embarrassment that they've refused to. And then that's the same thing with Operation Fox Hunt, which is a Chinese Communist Party operation where they're intimidating Chinese Canadians of Chinese origin in Canada. Not acceptable. So that's why Canadians are standing up to that sort of interference and are pushing the government to take action on that. And that includes things like banning Huawei from our 5G infrastructure. Okay, so increasing COVID restrictions about the guaranteed annual income and debt forgiveness about giving up rights to own anything. And, I hear your concerns. It appears that the government is not doing the guaranteed annual income. I can assure you that if I hear otherwise, I will be honest and upfront about that as soon as I hear otherwise. Now, there are political parties, the NDP being one of them, that think that that's a great idea. Conservatives do not. And if that changes, if the Liberals change their tune on that, because I was worried about it. In fact, we were asking a lot of questions in that regard. But at this point, they are not seeming to do that. And then when it comes to giving up the rights to own anything, I understand the concern around that. But certainly if there was a trade-off in getting a vaccine or to forgive debt or whatever the case is, unacceptable. Now, I know that I think I was forwarded an article about debt forgiveness and COVID, and the link had a little bit of truth, and that's for a company that needed a bailout from the government. So we're not talking small and medium-sized businesses where it's a mom and pop shop on Main Street or a few oil field trucks owned. We're talking about the big companies that need a bailout. The government would look at ensuring that there's either, an ownership. If a company couldn't take out a loan or whatever the case is, there would be an ownership element of it. But when it comes to the specifics on wide-scale debt forgiveness, I don't see that being the case. Now, there has been, for example, the student loans. There was a moratorium on having to pay them back. There's probably more to actually come on that regard, just as an FYI for all of those folks out there that have student loans. But so I don't. I'm confident that that's not the case, but certainly appreciate the question, and Conservatives will continue to ask that. And look, I get there's people that think that COVID is a lie. It's not. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not, and I'm sorry that the discourse has got to the point where it is so divisive that we can't. That there are subjects where we can't have a conversation in that. And I'm over the time, so I'm just going to go through here. So question about masks. Look, masks are not a silver bullet, but they do help in many circumstances. Okay, again, there's going to be people that think that's controversial, but they do help, and that's one tool that allows us to keep our economy moving. Okay, folks, and that's why it's not the cure, it's not the solution, but it is a tool that can be used. Okay. Okay. Let me here. I'm just gonna. So there was, regarding the isolation camps, there is an explanation for the situation in Manitoba that I'm not sure if it's been reported on widely, but it had to do with I believe it was a First Nations reserve that actually asked for that facility to be built, and it was empty. So I know that, again, there's little segments of truth, which is why some of this misinformation is believable. Okay. Okay, so I see a lot about Bill C-21. Appreciate those, but that is the provincial government's responsibility. So again, make sure that the link to find the contact information for your MLA is in the comments here. Okay, just gonna scroll through a few more of the questions. Question about the Constitution regarding lockdowns and whatnot. And look, the safety and well-being of Canadians is of the utmost importance. And those things are also have to coincide with freedom. Now, I believe that Canadians are generally going to make the best decisions for themselves. That's what freedom's about. It's about responsibility. And now the government's job is also to make sure that they provide guidance on what that looks like. And I know governments have had an incredibly challenging task. And I know you asked Premier Kenney in Alberta and the MLAs about the difficulty of having to actually, which is provincial jurisdiction in terms of the actual bringing about those health measures, incredibly difficult, and finding that right balance. Because you're right, freedoms have to be respected. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is enshrined in the Constitution. And there has to be the right balance struck there to make sure we can keep our economy moving so that people's well-being is respected, because without an income, you can't have a well-being. And it's important to find that right balance, and is not something that it needs to be done. Okay, so I'm just gonna. Question about how much the Liberals are spending on renovations being done to the House of Commons and Parliament Hill. If you look in the building I'm in, beautiful building, and I believe that we need to, ensure that these national landmarks are protected. Accountability seems to be the problem with the Liberals these days, and there's a whole bunch of questions around accountability and the renovations. That's something that we're actively working on. Make sure that there's a clear framework as to what is being spent, how it's being spent, that it's not just going to friend contractors that are friends or donors of the Liberal Party. Those are all questions that we are getting the answers on. And I know there are a lot of renovations being done to preserve what are historical landmarks in our country. And most Canadians agree with that, but it has to be done in a way that's accountable, and it's unfortunate that this government seems to be unable to do that. Okay, guys, I'm not only I've been over time, but my phone is almost dead. So I'm look. There's other comments here, and I apologize I didn't get a chance to get through every single one, but really appreciate. Let me wrap up with this. Okay, so we face significant challenges as a country, as the province of Alberta, as a region. I see those challenges each and every day, but it's not government that is the solution. Government can be a conduit for a lot of good, can help ensure that Canadians are able to be prosperous, protected, healthy and well. But folks, I am a believer first and foremost in the ingenuity, in the ability of Canadians, and that's why I say these next words with the utmost truth and confidence. We will get through all the challenges we face, whether it be the challenges faced with the economy, whether it be COVID, whether it be the specific regional challenges. And I know each and every community has a little bit of different challenges. And I talk to hundreds and hundreds of people on a weekly basis. And I'm confident that Canadians will be able to come out of the challenges we face stronger than ever. It's not going to be government that solves the problem. Now, government can inhibit, can do a lot to inhibit. But look at Canadians and Albertans and the folks from East Central Alberta have so much to be proud of, whether it be our history, whether it be what's to come. And I'm confident that will be the case. So let me leave you with that message of hope. I hope that the best is yet to come. So folks, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend some time with you on Facebook. Look forward to when it can be back in person, and very, very appreciative for all of those of you who joined in to this Facebook Live Town Hall. Now, the final thing that I'll say is very, very practical. If you have questions, concerns, whatever the case is, feel free to reach out to me. My email is damien.currick@parle.gc.ca. You can send me a message. You can text me, 403-575-5625, or give me a call at 1-800-665-4358. And because I said that really fast, because I don't want the phone's battery to die, I will post that in the comments as well. So folks, thank you so much for this. I'm confident the best is yet to come, because we're from the best region of the country and have the best people in Battle River Crowfoot. So thank you for the honor of being your representative in Ottawa. I'm here working for you. And although we may not agree on everything, I can assure you that I'm working for your best interests there. May God bless you, and look forward to being able to continue the conversation in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. Thank you so much, folks.